Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be responding to a comment that I received on my video Practical Charts is Awesome around missing values. So here's the comment right here. Interesting stuff. We're going to call this person Jonathan, so I'm not going to attempt that last name because I'm bad at that. Any tips on how to cleanly show missing for a blank value in a column chart in Power BI? You think it'd be easily done with the data label, but that does not seem to be the case. So I'll have a look and see what I can figure out. So that's this video. Let's see what I figured out, if anything. So if you don't know, again, if you don't own Practical Charts by Nick Desbarat, you are missing out. You should go buy that book immediately. It's a great book, in my opinion. But in one of the topics among just a tremendous many topics that he covers, is missing values. So in the importance that a missing value is different than a zero value, because for a zero value, you know that the value is zero, versus a missing value, you don't know if the value is zero or something else. So, but if you display them both as if they are zero, then you can be getting yourself in trouble and confusing the viewer of the report. So where this comes up in practical charts, I think he presents it as a line chart. And so here I have a line chart, and you can see here I've got, I've got 10, 12, some numbers. I have a blank, and then I have a zero, right? And so you notice here there is an option, right? So here's my line chart. I don't the numbers, January 6th doesn't appear on this chart, even though it sort of looks like it does, right? Because it's continuous from this January 5th to January 7th. So the user might be fooled into thinking, oh, because there's this January 4th exists, right? January 3rd, January 4th, January 5th. So the user might be fooled into thinking, oh, January 6th, it must be somewhere in between January 7 and 10, even though what really is going on is there's a missing value on this. Now, the first thing you might try on this is to go here and say, show items with no data, except that doesn't change anything at all. Okay. Well, why is that? Well, because it's the graph by default is set to continuous. So if you want to show missing values, you have to set it to categorical. And then that will give you this gap here, which kind of sucks because there's a lot of things you can't do with a categorical axis that you can do with a continuous axis. So if you want to show missing values, but you also want to do something like forecasting and things like that, you can't do that. So it's too bad that Microsoft created it that way, in terms of the continuous versus, show the values that don't exist. I mean, it's limiting, right? Once you set your access to categorical, your options within a line chart are much more limited, right? You don't have nearly as much, analytics capabilities. So it kind of sucks that this is only available, but this is the right way, according to Nick, and I agree, right, to show missing values. You got to show that gap. So it's evident that there is nothing, we don't have any data for this section right in here. So we have a clear break, but the zero actually shows up and shows zero. Okay, so that's kind of how it works with a line chart. I'd call it mid, as far as Power BI's performance or capabilities in this. Again, just because you have to set the access to categorical, and that's so limiting in Power BI. So let's take a look at a table. So here is a table, and this data set is built off of two different tables. So I have my table 2, and I have my banana, pickle, grapefruit, mango, and orange. And then table 1, I have data for banana, pickle, grapefruit, and orange is 0, but I don't have any data for mango. And obviously, these are related, right? So this is just if you go with out of the box table. I've got, this is obviously my column 1 from table 2, and then my sum of column 2 from table. And you can see here that mango shows up, and this is if you don't have show items with no data, mango doesn't even show up, right? So we get 6, 5, 2, 0. This is the sum of the column. Okay, so I have to turn on show items with no data, and I do get mango as a blank here. Now, the interesting thing about this is if you don't have a zero to compare to, and mango just shows up here as blank, and let's say orange is like 12 or something, you know, is it obvious to the end user viewing the report that, oh, is that a null value? I don't have any data for that, or is it zero and it's showing blank, etc. So it could be confusing if you don't have a zero to show. So maybe you want to make it more obvious. So we can create a measure to do that. So I'll add this measure in here. So here I have a measure 6520 missing, right? So it clearly tells the user that there's a missing, we don't have any data for this. And the way you can construct that measure, pretty simple, right? I mean, so the max table 2, column 1, right? So I grab that. I then filter all of the table for the column equals the item, column 2, and sum x column 2. If the value equals blank, and I wouldn't have had to do all that because if you had a relationship or didn't have a relationship, this would work regardless of whether, and that's how I constructed this measure, but it could be a lot simpler with that relationship in place. But regardless, the key important part of this is the if value equals blank, then missing. So the equals is like a very strict version of equals, if you will. Otherwise, I return the value and I concatenate with empty quotes just to turn it into text because it's not going to like it if I try to return a number in some cases and text in the other. But see what happens if I change this to just a single equals, right? Now, see, it's because of DAX, it treats the zero as a blank and the blank is a zero if you just use the equals. So you have to use equals in order to get this to work properly, right? All right, so we've done this with a line chart. We've done this with a table. Let's take a look at a column chart, which was the request. So here we go. I again have column 1, the same setup as this table, right? Additionally, I do have this set to be show items with no data. If I don't, right, Mango goes away. So I need to show that. And additionally, I do have data labels turned on, right? And the values down here, but set to the measure. So, and this is the same measure that I was using before. So the interesting thing here is that missing does not show up, right? Missing shows up here in this table, but for some reason, missing doesn't show up for this. And it's not because it can't, right? Because if I switch this to be just equals, missing shows up for orange, even though orange is 0. But I do this, that. It's not because this is too small, right? I can make this as big as I want. This data label still does not show up. So why is that? Well, the short of it is I don't know. Right? One of the thoughts that crossed my mind was auto exist. But auto exist it shouldn't come into play here because it's 2 different tables, right? Auto exist should only come into play when it's a single table and there's 2 filters and there's no matching rows that have both of those filters on it. That's where auto exist comes in and trips you up. Which I wish they would have a toggle which could allow you to turn that off because there's times when you would really like to turn that off. But so I don't think it's auto exist. It's not that the measure can't calculate, right? Because it's calculating here and showing missing, but for whatever reason with the data label, it just doesn't seem like it even tries to calculate. It's like, oh, there's no rows for mango, so I'm not even going to try to calculate that measure. Is what appears to be going on here, which is really quite annoying. Because again, if you don't have a 0 for comparison, and mango just shows up here as blank, then is it a 0? Is it blank? It's ambiguous, right? It could be ambiguous to the end user. So I don't know how to get Jonathan. I don't know how to get missing to show up here. I've tried a number of different ways to get that, but it doesn't seem like, for whatever reason, with the data label, when you're doing data labels and you have a measure that's calculating that data label, that it even attempts it with a value in the x-axis there where there's no rows to evaluate. or it returns null, essentially. It doesn't even try to calculate the data label for it, which is disappointing, right? And I don't know any way to fix it. So I realize I didn't solve the problem, but hopefully you've learned a few things along the way in terms of how to display missing values in Power, or at least how Power BI displays missing values. If you want to know more about this subject, again, highly recommend the book Practical Charts by Nick Desbarat. Awesome book. You should have it in your library. All right, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.